Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower, again, a president that perhaps gets a bad rap because of 1956 and the Sinai campaign and the pressure that's put on Israel. On the other hand, we know Dwight Eisenhower was the one that went into the camps and made sure that everything was filmed, and perhaps put General Patton in his place on that whole issue. How do you sum up Dwight Eisenhower? And
so in some ways, the way you framed it could, again, allow us to kind of go to this parting model of sometimes someone is not anti-Semitic, is not, now this is the opposite side, right? Here, I would say that in many ways he was good for the Jews. In that moment when he walks into a very small concentration camp, originally Ordorf, and he sees what's been done. And he turns to a young aide, and obviously he's been debating with the young aide about the Germans. And he says, you see who they are? Maybe they aren't as good as you think they are. And then he forces every German in the town next to the concentration camp to walk through and see what he just saw. And then, as you mentioned, he films it. And he sees the moral dimensions of this. And all of a sudden, if you go back to the origins of World War II, America's entry, there was a big debate in America. Is it the right thing to do or not? Should we get involved in this war? We got involved in World War I, and all we did was end up with dead soldiers and a Second World War. Seeing Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and these broken Jews on newsreels gave Americans a moral clarity that some didn't have until that moment, and that many had been building over the course of the fight against Nazi totalitarianism and Japanese totalitarianism. And so in that way, he was very much pro-Jewish, right? That's why sometimes we're oversimplifying when we go pro or con. Those aren't helpful terms. But indeed, I think that when it comes to his policy toward Israel, he did look at Israel as a bit of a thorn in America's side, as a little bit of a distraction. And certainly, and here again, we can roll back the reel with Harry Truman. You mentioned 1956. Well, it's not only the 1956 Suez campaign, but that occurs right in the middle of the 1956 re-election campaign. And so there's a political dimension where Eisenhower, who's trying to say, I'm the stable one. I've brought order. I've brought calm to the country. All of a sudden has this mess in the Middle East, and it wasn't caused by the bad guys, but it was caused by the good guys. Israel, France, and England together went into the Sinai for justified reasons, but still, from Eisenhower's perspective, they went behind his back, and they're causing trouble precisely when he's trying to consolidate what ends up being an election victory over Adlai Stevenson. And so I would say of all the modern American presidents, he's probably the most ambivalent until we get to Jimmy Carter's post-presidency. But nevertheless, he does still support Israel. And as I say, I would never, ever, ever call him anti-Semitic, because he had that moral clarity in the Holocaust. And by the way, when we talk about the ongoing question of the American relationship with Israel and the American relationship, frankly, with Jews, the fact that that generation of Americans who fought in World War II, who led the fight, as Eisenhower did, who witnessed with their own eyes the concentration camps, or heard about it from firsthand witnesses, or saw it in newsreels, the death of that generation means that we really need a reset in terms of American-Jewish relations and American-Israel relations, because that core instinctive understanding of the righteousness of the Zionist cause is less clear. Not that it's any less right, but it's just less clear in people's eyes.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy, so many different places named after Kennedy in Israel, the Kennedy Forest, the Kennedy this, the Kennedy that, obviously extremely popular in Israel. An avid student of history, Kennedy, a reader of history. Did he hold Zionistic views based on his understanding of history and the Bible, etc.?
So Kennedy not only had the Bible, but in 1939, as a young student, he's traveling and he goes to Palestine. And he says, if I can quote, "I first saw Palestine in 1939. There, the neglect and ruin left by centuries of Ottoman misrule were slowly being transformed by miracles of labor and sacrifice. But Palestine was still a land of promise in 1939, rather than a land of fulfillment." And so he very much sees it in biblical terms, but he also sees it in American terms, as the Jews are making the desert bloom. The Jews are fulfilling the prophecy, but the Jews are also very much living out the American dream. And when he was running for president in 1960, everybody was talking about how young he was, which basically meant how inexperienced he was, because he wasn't that much younger than his rival, Richard Nixon. But in one speech, he said, Israel's a very young country. I don't hold it against Israel, and I hope people don't hold age against me either. And that was Kennedy. He was able to kind of take a negative, turn it into a positive, very quippy. And he makes it very, very clear that he is a supporter of Israel, that he thinks that Israel is, as he said, Israel is here to stay. Time will judge whether Israel will continue to exist. But I wish I could be as sure of all my prophecies as I am of my flat prediction that Israel is here to stay. For Israel was not created in order to disappear. Israel will endure and flourish. It is the child of hope and the home of the brave. It can neither be broken by adversity nor demoralized by success. And I particularly love this line. He says, it carries the shield of democracy and it honors the sword of freedom. And no area of that world has ever had overabundance of democracy and freedom. So now, of course, we're seeing an evolution. It's not only the biblical prophecy. It's not only the Israel that could be, but it's the Israel that is in the process of formation that is already tied to American values, perpetuating American interests, and today also sharing many American challenges. He also, in historic terms, is important because he sells the first serious weapons package to Israel. It's defensive. It's missiles for anti-aircraft, but nevertheless, it's an important shift in the American strategic approach to the Middle East and to Israel.